Hello and welcome to the Birth Confidence Summit. I'm Charlotte Canny from Birth Essence, and today we have Amber Marshall, who is the founder of Big Birthas, which is an information and support website for women who are larger to get access to all the data and support that they need to help them have a really great birth experience. So welcome, Amber.
Hi.
Hi, and so I'm really happy to speak to you today, because I know that one of the things I've noticed is it can be challenging for women who've been classed as a high BMI and therefore a risk factor to get the kind of same treatment and birth that they would like. And so would you tell me a little bit about Big Birthas and why you set that up and what that is?
Yeah, sure. So back in 2009, my husband and I decided that we were going to have children. And so while I appreciated I was overweight and, there was risks, I thought, well, it's going to take ages because I'm overweight. I've read enough to know it's going to take me ages to get pregnant. So we'll just, we'll have the implant out now, because that's what I was using. And while we're getting ready to get pregnant, because it's going to take forever, I'll try and lose weight. We got pregnant in 3 months. It was a bit of a surprise. So that was the first kind of indication I had that the information and the messages I was getting, while prove that we tend to have more issues with things, they're not necessarily as bad as you think. But then obviously I got pregnant and I went through the system and I was filtered into these boxes. I wasn't allowed, for example, to use a midwife-led unit. I went on a tour of the birth pool suite in the obstetrics department, and I was shown it, and I was shown, and I was really positive about using a birth pool, so I thought it was good for me. And there was other things being thrown at me, like you need to maybe do this differently, you need to do that differently. So I started doing research, and there wasn't much information for people in Britain. I ended up kind of reading a lot of American websites, and as we know, their system's quite different. So I went through that process, and actually my pregnancy was fine. I assumed I would miscarry. I had been fed so much information that miscarriages were much more likely. I assumed I was going to get gestational diabetes because I'd been told, oh, you've got 3 times the risk of this happening. I fell into the trap of believing all this kind of statistics and all this, the way it's all presented as a relative risk. You've got this much times more this much times more this. But I started to read the research a bit more, and I realised that when they're talking about you've got 3 times the risk of this or 4 times the risk of that, actually those risks can be really, really, really small. So it might be just the risk of 0.004% of something happening instead of 0.001% of something happening. That's still a really, really tiny risk. I mean, it might be a catastrophic, incident, don't get me wrong, but it's a really small risk. And we're fed a lot of this information. And I think also the staff are fed a lot of this information. Oh, bigger women are high risk. I wouldn't say we're high risk. We're higher, but we're not high risk. The vast majority of us go on to have healthy births. The vast majority of us go on to, have healthy pregnancies. And to kind of make us feel anything else is to do us a disservice, really. And so I set up a website because I felt, having done this research, I felt, well, it would be a shame if it only benefited me. So I learned how to set up a website. It took me a while, a bit of a mess, but I kind of muddled through and started putting this information out there. And there was a need for it. People started messaging me going, really, really, really appreciative. I found your website, really good. It's really nice to have the approach where I don't tell anybody what to do. I talk about my experiences, but I mostly focus on, this is what this research says. This is how it was reported in the media, but this is what the baseline is and what it actually says. This is how much more at risk you are. It's, we're talking about 2% on top of 6% rather than, half as much again or a third as much again or whatever it is you're being told. And so it's continued from there. So with my second pregnancy, I was much more confident. I'd done it once, and we find this. I've done some research, which I'll talk about later, I'm sure. But we find this with women who've had a second pregnancy, and suddenly they're like, hang on a second, I'm not falling for all that this time. I know what I'm capable of. I know what my body can do. And we start to say, actually, no, I do want to do this. I do want to do that. I do want to have access to birth pool. As it happened in my first pregnancy, they'd shown me this birth pool, told me about to use it. And then when I was 8 centimetres dilated, somebody finally went, I'd been waiting for it all day. Somebody finally went, oh, actually, no, you can't. because they'd changed their policy while I was pregnant, but didn't tell me, despite the fact that I'd mentioned it every appointment because it was really, really important to me. So it's things like that. So now I really advocate for women to kind of do the research, get to know the really, the statistics that apply to you. Because as far as I'm concerned, even if we are at a higher risk of high blood pressure or a higher risk of gestational diabetes, those kind of things. But if those things don't come to pass, I don't really understand why we're being treated as high risk. Because if I haven't got high blood pressure, and you can check it, and I haven't got gestational diabetes, and you can, and you have checked it, but it's really frustrating to me that we're not given the opportunities. We're told in antenatal classes, be active, stay off the bed, keep mobile in labour, and you'll have a better time of it. And yet, time and time again, women should be encouraged, the bigger women are encouraged to lie on the bed, get yourself on kind of continuous fetal monitoring. You can't go in a pool, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then we're told, oh, well, bigger women, they have more inductions, they have more C-sections, they're just more of a problem. And, we're hearing that, we're seeing that, and actually maybe it's how we're treated and how the system works around us that is causing some of those problems, because it's not encouraging us in the way it encourages everybody else. Somebody very recently, I can't remember her first name, but she's it might be Joanne Neville. She's the coach of England netball team. She had a baby. She's older. She's not overweight. She's older, and she was just like, "Why am I being bombarded with all this negativity? As a coach, it's my job to push the positivity on my teammates. I want them to succeed, and I'm not going to get them to succeed by constantly banging on about what they did wrong last time or what might go wrong this time. I go on about, okay, we'll cross those bridges, we'll prepare for those eventualities perhaps, but we're not going to kind of treat everything as though it's going to be a catastrophic scenario. We're going to look on the positives, and why isn't birth more like that?" So yeah, I'm very passionate about positive birth. I'm very passionate about kind of high BMI women having the opportunity to assert themselves and say, actually, do you know what? If you're not going to let me access your midwife-led unit, if you're not going to give me access to a pool, that's something that's really important to me. Fine, I'll have a home birth. And that has been enough sometimes to get some trust to change their mind about how they treat women, or maybe some women go on to have a home birth. I did, and it was great. So it's quite a thing to kind of get for some people to get that confidence from somewhere. But at the moment we're being treated as though everything's going to go wrong, and that's not necessarily true.
It can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? Like what you just said, because if you're being treated differently and those differences are not conducive to the physiological birth, like you just described, lie on your back, be induced or so on, they already are causing their own problems. And then they're then blaming the fatness or, for the problem that, well, was it that, or was it the fact that you created a non-good environment of lying on the back, not allowing the water that was what you wanted, therefore there's more tension in you about not having what you wanted. So which is causing it? And I don't believe it's the physiology of the woman that's at fault, which is it feels like to me that because you have something that's off the standard perfect normal birth of having a high BMI, for example, everything that's happening everywhere to all women happens in spades, like really slamming it on, because this happens everywhere. And so the irony of labeling the woman as the fault when you've just created a more difficult situation for her to give birth in order to so-called protect her from her own body is damaging, and really great work to undo that and question it.
It's really hard, and it's taking 10 years on, I'm not seeing much difference, to be fair. Women are still coming up against these negative attitudes. They're still leaving appointments in tears because of how they've been spoken to and how they've been treated and how they've been made to feel really guilty and that they're going to be a bad parent and that they're irresponsible. And it's really important. It was really important for me to set up like a nurturing kind of supportive environment for these women, because I've been there, and it's horrible when you go to an appointment and this is the most exciting thing that's ever going to happen in your life. Like, this is incredible. You're growing a person inside of you, and yet some of the staff, it's a commonplace thing. They do it day in, day out, and you are a problem, and you're going to be a problem. And that's not necessarily true. And there is no benefit in making women feel that way. And like you said about kind of the way it's kind of, you said you don't believe that the statistics are, because of the woman's physiology. There's a study that actually backs you up entirely. There's a Canadian study, and they looked at all the different kind of confounding factors that happen to women with a high BMI. So, yes, we are at marginally increased risk of gestational diabetes. We are at marginally increased risk of breast cancer. We are at increased risk of, high blood pressure. We're increased risk of different things. But we also get treated differently. And so what they did was they looked at the scenario, and they looked at, okay, if you don't treat women differently, is the outcome the same as for everybody else? And they went, good gosh, yes, absolutely. If you remove the confounding variables, so, okay, you've got a healthy high BMI woman, which some people would sort of say, actually, no such thing. No, I dispute it. You can be very healthy and be fat. You can be very unhealthy and be thin. You can't look at me and decide how often I eat fast food in a week, or in a month, how often I take exercise. The trouble is, professionals are doing that. You go into an appointment and they say, right, you need to get more exercise. You didn't ask me how much exercise I was getting. How can you say I need to get more? Anyway, I don't. But yeah, the study looked at all this and went, actually, if we don't change the way the women are treated, and they haven't got any underlying conditions, the outcomes are exactly the same or near enough. Statistically no difference. And so that's just like a huge wake-up call for me that, don't get me wrong, we are incredibly lucky to be in a system where we have so much care, where we have, we're not giving birth under a tree here. We've got masses of options. We've got, not that I'm saying giving birth under a tree is a bad thing.
I quite like the idea, actually. It's always in form.
I can totally go for that these days. I've got the confidence that my body knows what it's doing now.
Yeah.
But not everybody has that confidence, and especially not first time around. A lot of people are like, oh no, I can't even pretend I'm going to want a home birth because I want the security of knowing there's doctors, knowing there's midwives, and knowing there's a hospital, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, we're incredibly lucky to have that option. But at the moment, there's an awful lot of pressure on the medicine kind of being the saviour and being the solution, whereas actually I think a much more simpler approach to encourage a woman to be much more natural, dimmer lights, and more, a more conducive environment to being relaxed, less of the kind of the pressure, less of the kind of, we've timed you and you're not progressing fast enough. For whom? Why do I have to be on your schedule? If you can do checks that kind of ensure that things are going okay, which you can. I mean, for instance, I was one of the battles I had with this was in my second pregnancy. They started encouraging high BMI women to have injections of Clexane to prevent deep vein thrombosis. Okay, now this was because they'd noticed there was an increase in the risk, there was an increase of incidence of deep vein thrombosis, which can be catastrophic. And women have a higher BMI women have a higher likelihood of this happening. So okay, so they've gone, right, here's the problem, what's the solution? Well, when we know people are at risk of deep vein thrombosis, we give them an anticoagulant medication. Now, if you're pregnant, you can't have warfarin, but the other one's called Clexane. There may be others now, I don't know. And so Clexane's safe for use in pregnancy. So they were like, right, okay, let's give all these high BMI women Clexane. It might help. That was all the theory behind it. There was nothing more than a theory behind it. Now, this came in between my two pregnancies. So I had them 2 years apart, and I had a great midwife. She was incredibly supportive, and she was like, right, you're going to want to read up on this. So this is the new guidance that's come out. You go away and read up on it. And even in that appointment with her, I was like, now hang on a second. I know I'm also at risk of postpartum hemorrhage. Surely, if you give me something that thins my blood, isn't that going to make that? Yeah, isn't that going to make that eventuality more risky? I've had one pregnancy and I didn't have a postpartum hemorrhage or deep vein thrombosis. I can monitor myself for the, identification signs.
Know what the signs are. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what the signs are. So I can, and she was like, do you know what? I don't know. I'll go and do some research and see if I can find out. Next appointment with her, she was like, have you found anything? And I was like, no. She was like, I haven't found anything either. So like, okay, well, when I next go to see the obstetrician, I'll bring it up with them. Oh, the obstetrician was not happy with me. So you're a doctor now, are you? Was what I got. I was like, no, but you're advising me to have something on the basis of nothing more than, opinion. Okay, I'm not prepared to be a guinea pig for this. Okay, so unless you've got some information for me that helps me make a more informed decision, I'm not interested. So, you know, she was not happy with me at all. And, you know, I didn't quite get, you know, the usual, oh, you know, you're putting your baby at risk, you're being reckless thing, which you can get. But, you know, she was very much like, well, I'm recommending this, it's guidelines. I'm not interested in it being guidelines. You know, I can monitor this. Yeah, exactly. I want the evidence. You're telling me to do something. I raised a concern that might increase my risk of something else, and you just want me to go ahead with it anyway. So anyway, so I didn't have the Clexane. And funnily enough, I believe since then they have got the data from the people who were the guinea pigs. Didn't make any difference. And it's very, very frustrating that we're expected to kind of just roll with this. We're expected to just kind of go, oh, you know, this is a problem. Same with the folic acid thing. So women who have a higher BMI are recommended to have 5 milligrams of folic acid instead of the normal 400 micrograms. So again, I'm looking into this, and okay, folic acid's fairly benign. It's probably not going to cause you any major, you know, issues if you do have this higher dose. But again, it's based on nothing more than women with a higher BMI have a slightly increased risk of neural tube defects. Other women who have an increased risk of neural tube defects because of a genetic predisposition to it benefit from high dose folic acid. Should we try giving it to the fat women? And that's exactly what they did. And it's very, you know, I find it incredibly frustrating. So I like to kind of put all this information out there for people to kind of make their own decisions. They can, you know, do the research themselves. They can look into it and go, right, what do I want to do about this? Do I want to go with recommendation, despite the fact there's no evidence for it? Or do I want to make my own decisions? And we're perfectly capable of doing that. We need to be treated as intelligent adults that we are.
Yeah. And I think you will get a hit as to what's right for you. I've talked about this with other people. Some people will choose to take something and some will choose not to, and that is the right decision. A different decision for different women, different pregnancy. You can't see everything in, but the woman can tune in and go, okay, choose this with the best ability and the best information. You've still got your own intuition, which is an overlooked information source.
Absolutely. You know, and there's a slight frustration as well. I mean, I was lucky. I only did have to do the glucose tolerance tests once for each pregnancy. But I hear of some women who, you know, the doctors are so absolutely convinced that they're over the weight, they must have gestational diabetes. They send them for multiple tests. The worst I've heard is one woman who had 7 glucose tolerance tests. That can't be good for your body or your baby. You know, you're not allowed to eat for several hours. You're then given like a high dose of sugar. Then you've got, you know, it just doesn't seem like a good thing. And if you didn't believe the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth results, why on earth would you go, yay, we've got the result we want at last, and believe the seventh if it's different? It just, my mind is blown that sometimes I think some medical professionals hear this kind of negativity message so much, and it's become so internalized that that there's an unconscious bias, also conscious bias towards bigger women, and it's not borne out really by the evidence, I don't feel. So some of the I did start looking at hospital policies at one point. Some of them are just so rude in their wording, you know, or, you know, a high BMI woman is basically a problem to be managed. You know, it's kind of, you know, she must be installed on a bed of such and such. No, she doesn't get installed anywhere, or it's just
all on a bed.
It's this such language that kind of. Don't get me wrong. There were other hospital trusts whose language was brilliant, very much along treating each woman holistically and individually and looking at everybody's individual circumstances. You know, they're saying, oh, you know, you can't do X, Y, and Z because you won't be able to get up on a bed or you won't be able to climb into a pool. You mind just checking? You can ask me to do that and watch me do it, you know.
Have you seen that video that goes around on Facebook? I'm not sure. It's a black woman doing yoga. She's quite large. Have you seen it? I mean, awesome. You could look at her and put her into, I'll have to look it up and tag it in the video, but and then make all those assumptions you said, that she wouldn't be able to go upstairs, she's unfit, and actually she's just large, very fit, very healthy. I can't do a lot of those poses. I haven't got the strength. I especially at the moment, I'm a bit unfit at the moment. I've always been generally fit and looked after myself, but at the moment I'm not as healthy as I usually am, and she's probably more healthy.
Absolutely.
You can't tell.
there's high BMI triathletes, there's high BMI marathon runners, there's high BMI cyclists, there's high BMI ballerinas, you know.
And what I've noticed in groups that I've been in, you can be 1 point or 1 point of a point over the deadline, the marker, which can change. I think, is it different in some trusts or is it standardized?
They generally pick kind of the boundaries of 25, 30, 35, 40, you know, they tend to pick
and
the same.
As soon as you're over a marker,
oh yeah,
the whole thing changes of how you're treated.
And that's just a few centimeters different in height, you know, because and that's the other frustrating thing as well. Often a woman will get measured in a community clinic by her midwife, and you know, obviously that's earlier in the pregnancy, so she's not put on much weight, or not, you know, nothing much has changed. So they measure her height there, they measure her weight there. Several weeks later, they go to the hospital. Hospital crosses out what the original midwife wrote, because of course she couldn't possibly have done it properly. So they measure again and go, oh right, no, your BMI is this now. Well, I'm 18 more weeks pregnant. You know, it's not. Again, it just feels like people are changing the boundaries and changing the goalposts. And like you said, you only have to tip that balance, and then suddenly, oh no, everything's going to go wrong for you. You're going to be a complete nightmare. It just doesn't make sense. But that's, you know, it's very pigeonholey at the moment. It's very much putting people in boxes and going, right, you tick this box, therefore this will happen to you. You tick, and there's a lot of problem with the language that's being used. There's a lot of, like, you know, we don't allow high BMI women to do X, Y, and Z. You're not doing the allowing. I'm doing the choosing. You convince me, and then maybe we'll do that. But no, you don't allow me to have a home birth. I choose a home birth. It's very frustrating. We did because of the site, I ended up working with a group called Parenting Science Gang. And it's a really interesting project where they get parents to do research on the stuff that matters to them. So it started with washable nappies, but it's encompassed kind of breastfeeding, picky eating, and food refusal, all sorts of things. And I was asked whether we wanted a group for women with high BMI. And I was like, oh, yes, please. Yeah, let's do that. So we did some research. And what we decided to do was research women who'd had more than one pregnancy, because we know that what you do in your first is not necessarily what you choose to do in your second. And so, you know, we wanted to see if people's experiences changed as a result of having more experience. And we wanted to know kind of what they wanted from pregnancy and what they got, and see whether the differences lied and whether they did anything differently. And we discovered that for a vast majority of women, they didn't have a great time in their first pregnancy. Second pregnancy, they were much more ready to kind of rock the boat and say, no, I'm not putting up with this. I'm only going to have one glucose tolerance test. No, I'm not having, you know, umpteen appointments with an anaesthetist that I'm not going to use, you know, those kind of things. And but they did also have a tendency to just withdraw from services. So they wouldn't go to the scans, they wouldn't go to the midwifery and the obstetric appointments. And that's just a crazy scenario, because they've been made to feel so awful. And a lot of them commented on how it affected their mental health negatively. But they felt that basically to protect themselves and their mental health, they had to, you know, put maternity services that are there to protect them and their baby as far away from them as possible. And that's just a crazy situation to be in. We should be working together to build, you know, really good relationships with our healthcare providers, and they should be doing the same. But the trouble is, the way some are being treated, it's just not happening. So don't get me wrong, there's some lovely midwives and some lovely anaesthetists and some lovely obstetricians out there, but there's also some really horrible ones.
Yeah. And it's come into the news like this week, hasn't it, with where Dr. Marco, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Godoin, who suggested, on what I'm gathering is no evidence, that bigger women have fat deposits inside the vagina and are more likely to have obstructed births. And my understanding is that you can scan to check that. And like you said, with the other things, there's a risk, and then there's the reality. Have you got diabetes or all these other things? Have you really got fat deposits? You can actually check that, plus the fact there doesn't appear to be any evidence. And what are your thoughts on this particular scandal of the moment?
This was just, I've heard it before. So it came from a study back in 1997 that discovered that there was differences between, you know, outcomes for bigger women. And they were like, oh, why could this be? They seem to have more obstructive labour. Oh, maybe they've got fat vaginas, is basically how this happened. Now, you'd think that if this was postulated in 1997, somebody might have found some evidence for it by now, but there hasn't been anything since, okay? So, but what happened was, this was a this was an interview situation on BBC Radio Scotland, where they had a birth expert, so Millie Hill, who's a journalist, she wrote Give Birth Like a Feminist, and they also had Dr. Marco, and I can't remember or pronounce his surname either, so I'll just find the doctor.
Yeah, I'll tag him properly, but I don't know his
Thank you. No, I don't know his name either. Now, it turns out that they approached, this has come out since, they approached midwives, obstetricians, birth experts, but they couldn't get one to come on the programme, so they asked a doctor of fertility to come on the programme to talk about inductions. Now, it has since been suggested that he wasn't the expert that maybe he should have been. And, the journalist who set it all up is like, well, he's a doctor, there's a lot of different specialisms in medicine, and you can't just pick somebody from one and drop them into another and expect them to know what they're talking about. Now, some doctors would say, I don't know about this, if they're put in the spot, but other doctors don't like to feel they're not the expert and will come out with any random piece of information that they've dredged from, some article they read or something they've heard. And I think this is what happened here. So this doctor kind of went, the reason is women have got fat birth canals, and that's what causes obstructive labour. And boom, that was where the interview ended. So unfortunately, Millie, who was in that position, didn't even get a chance to go, what? I had heard it before, like I said, but Millie hadn't heard it. And it then kind of blew up in the press a bit, because it's just so ridiculous to have a doctor put in the position where they're fed as the expert. This person's got a medical degree, they are the expert. He says, women have got fat vaginas, bigger women have got fat vaginas. And that then just kind of goes down as if it's fact. And if it is fact, the spokeswoman for the College of Royal Obstetricians and categorically not true. Umpteen midwives have come and said, no, categorically not true. But it has gone out there as just, that's fact. Doctor said it, must be true. It was on the BBC after all. It's so frustrating.
From what you're saying, I'm wondering, sometimes it points to one of the problems with the media, where they want to entertain and have drama. So it suggests to me they were deliberately looking for someone to be opposite Millie, who would have a different opinion. I don't know for sure, but that's the result, essentially. Even if that wasn't intentional, even if they wanted a valid debate and discussion, but you do need opposing opinions for a debate, but it still smacks a bit of the media, let's dramatise it and get people talking, instead of informing, which is really what I would associate with BBC in my naivety, what I would expect. And like you said, nobody wanted to come on because there isn't the evidence, so they took someone else.
Well, to be fair, the discussion, the actual discussion was supposed to be about inductions. So it wasn't even like the whole talk was about, whether fatter women have fatter birth canals at all. He just threw that in at the end, like a kind of, like a grenade.
Was he more knowledgeable on inductions?
I'm not sure he could have been. Like, when
he's
was
a
the last
fertility expert? You don't
he's 9 months the wrong end.
Yeah, he's at the wrong end.
When was the last time you witnessed a birth, even, let alone an induction? So anyway, it's just, it was a mess. It really was a mess. But you're absolutely right. There's such a pressure in the media to kind of make mountains of molehills, make a story, make it kind of much more salacious and interesting than it is. And it's so frustrating, because when you're on the other side of that, even reporting on that article. So it was then picked up by Grazia magazine, who interviewed Millie Hill about it, and looked into the research and kind of went, yeah, there isn't any. Then the Sun picked it up, and they were the people who asked the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists to comment. Then the Daily Mail got involved, and they asked me and quite a few other people to kind of comment as well. And we all put our, opinion that it was nonsense and had no basis in fact at all. But bottom of the Daily Mail article, that was reasonably, I was really shocked.
Yeah, it was reasonable for the Daily Mail. It was quite good.
I know, I was, well, this is it.
But that was because they were countering, they wanted the sales by countering what had gone in the other one. So, but they actually did a reasonable article nevertheless.
They did a reasonable article, and they quoted everybody. They quoted what I sent verbatim. I was really surprised because I was expecting it to be twisted. I was expecting to be taken out of context. No, it was quoted verbatim. But then at the bottom of the article, it goes, oh, you know, high BMI women have 3 times the risk of this, and you're like, oh, here we go again. You know, you mind not putting the relative risk stats, or if you do put the relative risk stats, put the actual numbers as well, because when you're talking about such small risks, it's very, very manipulative. And the NICE guidelines say this. NICE guidelines know that relative risk statistics are manipulative and are, you know, scaremongering, which is why they have a piece of guidance that says, don't do this. You know, don't just put relative risk statistics, but the actual risk statistics so people can make an informed choice. But it just keeps happening over and over again. And, you know, blow me down, but when I got to my bit in the piece, it's been changed now. When I got to my bit in the piece, what did they choose to have as a picture? Oh, a fat, pregnant belly, because, you know, fat people, we don't have heads, you know. If you have a news story...
I thought that when I was watching it. I wondered whether they couldn't get a picture of you. Wasn't it a stock image?
They didn't ask. They didn't ask for a picture of me. I was naive. I didn't even consider they want one. To be fair, I sent one. As soon as I saw that, I sent a picture of me, and it's now been changed. But it's very much, you know, it's a thing. Exactly. It's a constant battle, though. I mean, there are huge libraries. So if you are producing a document that is concerned with, you know, treatment of people with a high BMI, I think it's, you know, Obesity Prevention Canada. There's loads of different organisations, and they have libraries of positive images of people who are overweight and obese. You know, and you can use those rather than, you know, it's so common to see a news story accompanied with a picture of a burger or chips drizzled in ketchup, or, you know, fat people's backsides and stomachs, but no heads, no feet. They're just, you know, they're just dismembered, you know, torsos. It's constant, and it's, I mean, don't get me wrong, fat shaming and kind of that kind of attitude is very prevalent in society at the moment. I think, you know, we've taken over from the smokers. People have got bored with the smokers. Most of them have stopped. You know, who's the latest scourge of the NHS? Oh, it's going to be fat people or immigrants. You know, it's like there's such a narrative where we have to blame people. We have to scapegoat people. The fault of X is Y. Whereas I think, you know, reality in life is much more nuanced than that, you know, and possibly the problems in the NHS are caused by underfunding and, you know, those kind of issues. But, you know, let's blame the fat people and their fat vaginas, because they're, you know, they're clearly the issue we've got. And it's just, oh, yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what helped you when you were, I mean, your second birth, you were stronger, and what helped you to find that confidence?
So I was really lucky in that I'm quite a confident person anyway. My husband was very much on board. He'd seen, you know, everything happen in the previous pregnancy. So he was very supportive with my kind of, you know, wish for a home birth, and kind of like, you know, he's an engineer. So he thought about the kind of practicalities of what to do if we need to kind of get me out of the pool quickly. So he had kind of answers for all the questions that they might raise in terms of, oh, yeah, no, that's too high risk. You can't possibly do X because of Y. And he'd be like, yeah, but we could do Z instead. And as soon as you've got answers for some of these questions, that helps. I also was really lucky. I dropped my GP midwife because the midwife who visited me postnatally, I found was much more supportive, much more open, much more understanding that, you know, I might have an opinion on my own kind of treatment, and much more ready to just go, here's some information, take it, read it, come back to me if you've got any questions, rather than this is what you need to do. And, you know, I don't respond very well to that. So she was great. So I found where she worked and transferred my care to her. And I knew then that I would have her hopefully for the entirety of my pregnancy and for the home birth. So she was great. So then when I started coming up against problems with the same maternity unit I used, I changed hospitals. So I went to a much more home birth. So I'm lucky, I'm in the centre, you know, I'm in Birmingham, so I've got a lot of options.
You're in Birmingham?
Yeah.
I live in Birmingham. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Carry on. Did you know that?
That's hilarious.
Wow, okay. That's cool. Right, we'll carry on. Carry on.
So, yeah,
so I know the hospitals in Birmingham.
I have quite a lot of options.
Carry on.
I can practically walk to 2 of them. I can walk to 1 of them in 10 minutes. So I had no kind of qualms. So again, situationally, I'm not like half an hour, 3/4 of an hour from my nearest maternity unit. I can walk there in 10. So, you know, in terms of those kind of things, I'm fortunate in my location. And then, so I had quite a few protective factors. I had a really good website in America that I was following called Well-Rounded Mama. And like I said, although a lot of the perspective there is to do with the American system, I could still at least, you know, she's still referring to the same research that I'm referring to. You know, I'm extrapolating it for a UK audience, but, you know, just because she's extrapolating it for a US audience doesn't mean it's worthless to me. So she was really helpful. And so just generally all these kind of things, I had lots of protective things in place. Plus I'd had one happy, healthy, easy, you know, pregnancy and labour and birth. So those kind of things all, I mean, don't get me wrong, the worst things about my labour and my birth were the treatment I got from the healthcare professionals. The birth itself was fine, but the sort of the treatment afterwards and the kind of, you know, the belittling and the kind of dismissal and those kind of things were what really bothered me. So, you know, but in terms of those kind of factors, I had lots. I did have support. I did have various elements. Then when I decided I was definitely going to go for a home birth, I found an online kind of round robin-y, email-y kind of thing. I'm not sure it's still going now. It was set up by a very experienced home birth midwife who kind of had, you know, you could ask questions there. And so that was really helpful. That was a bit like the kind of forums we've got now on Facebook where we can discuss these things. But this was, you know, he's 7 now. It's a while ago. So again, I would ask questions going, oh, they've told me about this, or what happens about this, or, you know, they won't bring me my my birthing pack. How? And then they were like, no, don't worry, you don't need that yet. You won't get that till 37 weeks or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine then. I feel like they're fobbing me off, kind of thing. And they go, no, that's fine. That's procedure for everybody. Because you start to get a bit paranoid, especially because of my previous experience where I've been told up until the point of literally like about to pop a baby out that I was going to be able to use a birth pool, and then suddenly having whisked away at the last moment, I've become very mistrusting, because just because you say I can do it now doesn't mean that you will let me do that. So yeah, and then as it turned out, the midwives who came were really supportive and really lovely, and yet popped another baby out in the lounge.
How did it feel giving birth? I love to hear different people's feelings about how it feels to give birth when they have a positive experience.
So both my experiences were positive. The first birth, I felt like a warrior. I felt like I didn't feel like a goddess in that particular birth. I felt, but I was really angry that I hadn't been allowed to, I'd been misled, because I just had this inkling that using a pool would be very beneficial to me. I love swimming. I go swimming a couple of times a week. I do aquafit. If I have period pain, I get in a bath. All these things to me are like, water is going to be it's going to be really helpful. So I had 3 baths while I was in labour, but I wasn't allowed access to a birth pool. That's another story entirely. The bath I had, the access was terrible. It was far more dangerous than let me go in a birth pool, but whatever. Anyway, but actually the giving birth, I was like, they said, they were concerned because her heart rate had dropped or increased. I can't remember which, one or the other. And I personally believe that was due to the massive surge of adrenaline I got for being so cross from being told I wasn't allowed to go in a birth pool. But anyway, because it was literally at that moment they're like, oh no, this isn't going to happen, blah blah blah. And I was like, I even said to my husband at that point, right, what are my options here? Can I transfer to a different hospital? Can we go home? And he's like, I think you're staying here. You can see the panic in his eyes as he goes, oh my God, how am I going to manage this?
Giving birth in the car.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, she can't. I've got to keep her here anyway. So I gave birth. They were like, we're concerned about her statistics. We're concerned about her blood pressure or heartbeat, whatever it is. She needs to come out soon, or we're gonna have to take you for emergency section because we're worried. So I'm like, okay, bang, out came one push.
Wow.
I mean, that's not exactly ideal. I wouldn't suggest it to people, because then you involve some, remedial work later when they need to get their needle and thread out. But that was all. So the birth itself, I was just like, wow, that wasn't that hard. I was one of those super calm people who was just, I was kind of laughing and joking and cheerful and kind of quite calm. And they're like, oh, you can't be, you're not established yet because, you're far too calm. And then they check and go, oh. And so, I got the impression that I'm slightly unusual, although I've spoken to lots of other people and they're also slightly unusual.
I think that you're not necessarily unusual, but they were relying on factors out of a book that has a standardized, if you were taking those, and there's different variations of normal, and that if you are looking at how the room smells and how you're moving your body, how your belly is moving, they may, and with experience of different women's different ways of giving birth within the spectrum of normal, because there are midwives I've spoken to who don't believe that you will progress more than 1 centimetre an hour, and thinks that vaginal examinations will tell her lots of things about how it's going to go, and I'm saying it's just telling you where you're up to. But because she's got this strong belief, I believe, like on a sort of quantum level, it's affecting what she's willing to see and what actually happens in her presence. And yet I hear stories all the time of women who are 2 centimetres and give birth half an hour later and so on, and the opposite where they're 8 centimetres and it stays like that, and it's not a problem unless the baby's distressed or you're distressed. It's not a problem, it's a failure to wait thing. So tell me how you felt in the second birth.
So the second birth was great. So this time I'm in my house, obviously it's familiar ground. So this first baby was early by I was told I was going to be late. Fat women give birth late. She was early by 3 days, so that was a surprise. For this baby, I'm like, well, she was early, he's probably going to be early as well, or who knows, Anyway, we had visitors, we had guests. So we were having lunch. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions for ages, for weeks beforehand. So, I was having regular contractions, but didn't really think much of it while we were having lunch. We waved them off to drive back up north where they were going home. And I was like, actually, these contractions are kind of regular. Maybe I should time them. So I get out some kind of, I load up some apple, something I think I had. And I was like, oh, actually, they're 1 minute long and 3 minutes apart. We probably should contact somebody about this. So my parents were coming up from Gloucestershire, 70 miles away, to take my daughter, who's by now 2. So I give them a ring going, look, I'm going to call the midwife. I'm not sure, we're not sure, but, best, get yourselves ready. So they start coming, they start driving up. We call the midwives. Because I'd had such a quick, latent phase, I think is the word, weren't here in the previous pregnancy. So literally I'd gone from, you're going to give birth soon, to, oh my God, it's already here. They were like, we can't take any risks with your home birth. We have a feeling you'll give birth really quickly again. Do I mean latent? Is that right? Is that the right word?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, good. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but occasionally I kind of I'm not a midwife. I don't have that experience. Anyway, so yeah, they decided that there was a chance that I would give birth very quickly. So they sent whoever was closest. She was really irritable that I had disturbed her day. Because again, she came, I was calm, I was cheerful, I was chatting around. She wanted to kind of do an exam on my belly. So, I skipped up the stairs to go and lie on the bed. And she was like, calm down, you don't need to rush, kind of thing. Anyway, she took one look at it and went, no, you're nowhere near yet. There's no rush. I think the baby was born an hour and a half later. But yeah, so the actual proper home birth midwives who were allocated, we turned up maybe half an hour later. She skipped off. Everybody started getting going. And then, yeah, it all happened pretty quickly. My parents finally, we ended up giving my husband was amazing. He's a complete, for me, I'm really lucky. He's like an untrained doula. He knew exactly what to kind of rub, where to rub, what to say, how to do it. My mum finally, he saw that I'd got kind of zoned in and went, uh-oh. So he very, very cleverly took our 2-year-old across the road and left her with a neighbour for a bit. And said, I think this might be soon. My mum and dad knock on the door and they're like, oh, sorry, we had to go and, get petrol and do that. I'm like, you've been on birth wake up, watch for weeks now. Like, what on earth do you mean you have to go get petrol? Anyway, so they turned up and they went, right, well, should we go and get B from the neighbour? My husband went, I don't think so. I think you might want to just hang on. My mum put the kettle on and she heard a baby cry. Oh, that was how fast it happened. It was so quick.
How did it feel? Because you were in your zone as all this was going on around you. How did it feel to do that in your own home? On your terms, essentially.
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. I felt like a goddess that time. Last time I felt like a warrior. This time I was just bliss. It was lovely. I went, they did, I had to be stitched up again because, yeah, 2 pushes this time, but it was quick. But yeah, so I had to be stitched up again. But then they were like, right, you go upstairs and have a bath. Babies, I nursed immediately. So, everything's all good here. So we'll take care of things downstairs. You go and have a bath and then come down. So I went and had my bath, came downstairs. The lounge was back to being, well, I'd say immaculate, but that's a lie because my house is never immaculate. But it was back to looking how it did beforehand. I wanted like a blood spatter or something on the wall. I wanted like a memento, but there was nothing. It's a bit pointed out, yes, and all that. But yeah, no, it was all immaculate. My little girl was still here. Now, she wasn't supposed to be, but whatever. She was across the road, so she came over, saw her teeny tiny baby brother, and then my parents whisked her off. And the midwives finished their paperwork. We got a takeaway in. Me, my husband, and the brand new baby all went to bed. It was just, it just felt so right. And the midwives were so much more respectful of me and my choices because they were on my turf. At one point, they wanted to ring a supervisor to discuss something. They were like, do you mind if we just ring our supervisor? They weren't even asking to use my phone. They were going to use their phone, but they asked my permission to ring a supervisor because they were in my house and my turf and kind of, it was just, there's so much more courtesy and so much more, I don't know, you just feel, in hospital, I felt like a cattle. I felt I was being processed. I was on a conveyor belt. They kept coming in while I was doing my first feed, kind of going, oh, could you hurry up? We'd like to use this room. And I'm like, I've been told how important this is. I'm not stopping. And then they'd come back in and go, oh, you're still feeding. Oh, we could really do with using this room. Could you hurry up a bit? I'm like, this is literally the first time I've done this in my life. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm surprised it's working at all because guess what? I've been told I'm fat. My breastfeeding is going to be a problem. It's all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I very much felt like, I was being rushed to do things. I was on a conveyor belt. You get referred to as mum. Nobody remembers to call you by your actual name, despite it being on your notes. They can look and call you by your name. They can call the child by their name. No, they know your name. They know your husband's name. You're drinking a cup of tea out of a proper mug at the right temperature and with the right tea bags. And, it's all, just everything just, I don't know, it slots perfectly. Well, it did for me anyway. I mean, obviously that's not everybody's experience, but it was just,
beautiful. Yeah.
It was amazing.
Wonderful.
I'm so lucky that my that's been a problem because otherwise I'd have loads more.
So it's really fantastic information and fantastic stories. So if you had a kind of nutshell vision for birth, for the future of birth, what would you love to see happening?
What I'd love to see is that high BMI women are treated as the norm because actually, do you know what? More than 50% of women giving birth at the moment are overweight or obese. So we are the norm. Okay, so I'd like to see us given the same options as everybody else. I'd like to see, people be mindful of the risks and prepare for any eventualities in case they occur. But I'd like to see healthcare professionals be positive about what we are likely to achieve and what is likely to happen, because there's no reason to be anything else.
Like the sport coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If there was one thing that women could take away from listening to you today that would really support her to have a confident birth, what would you?
I would say do your research, do your reading. Don't expect the doctor you're dealing with to have an absolute knowledge of all your circumstances, because they won't. Even though they're an obstetrician or a gynecologist, they will know about many different births and some of them don't see that many natural births. So, viewpoints can be very much skewed in terms of medicalised birth because that's what they deal in day out. So I would say make sure you know your own personal risks, make sure you know what applies to you, so that when you're being told stuff, when stuff's being suggested to you, you can make what is a fully informed decision. Because the trouble is you're often presented with, this is what we recommend. They don't give you, I haven't got time to go in now, but if you do the brains analysis of this about what the benefits are. Thank you. Yeah. I've got it on my website. So yeah, if you kind of look into that and ask all the relevant questions, whether you should do it or shouldn't do it, what the benefits, what happens if you delay this decision for half an hour, those kind of things are really, really relevant and really helpful at making you feel that you're in control of the process that is happening to you And let's be clear, we're not ill, we're only pregnant. It's meant to happen. It's, you know, it's what we're biologically designed to do. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It is out of the ordinary for you. So make the most of it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Amber. It's been really wonderful to chat to you today, and I'm sure your interview will be really useful to lots of women who need that support.
I hope so.
Yeah, so thank you so much today, and I look forward to the time when your vision comes true and we're all treated like healthy women, not ill. All of us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So yeah, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.